All right. Well, hello, everyone. I see Connie, I see John, I see Kara. Thank you for joining so far, and I can't see everybody on all of the platforms, but those three for sure I can see right off the bat. So thank you for joining. Hope everyone's having a great day. First things first, I'm actually curious. This is actually even more important today. Well, we'll be talking about respect influence, how to get respect in the old Rodney Dangerfield. But just wanted to share a couple of things, really important. I had got an iPhone 11 Plus Pro 11 Pro Max, I guess it is. As you can tell, I'm not an Apple guy. Just to be able to talk to my parents over FaceTime, specifically my dad. My mom has dementia and high risk and all the rest of it, so they're not able to get out an awful lot. So I went and pulled the trigger on this iPhone, and it was pretty good. FaceTime works well. My dad's using it on his iPad. It's got one icon on it that he can open. But what's really interesting with it is, and I see myself being this person eventually. But we phone my dad. So when I say we, either my brother or I, we phone. Hey, Dad, gonna be FaceTiming you here shortly, so just head to the iPad and we'll call you on there. He's like, yeah, that sounds good. So sure enough, FaceTime through and he picks it up, typically after the third try, but that's okay. And then he sits with the phone in his like here, and then so we'll be talking, and I'll be like, hey, just you don't have to. Talk on the phone anymore. We're just talking through FaceTime. Yeah, okay. No, sounds good. And then he'll hold, or he'll just put it down, and then it will start beeping because I've hung up, kind of thing. And I half joke with my son Hunter. I'm like, dude, it's gonna be me. I'm sorry, it's gonna be me somewhere along the line where my VR goggles won't work and I'll be unable to talk to him or whatever it is. But anyways, so my point out of all of that is I've only had this for about a week, and I'm going back to my Galaxy. Yep, that's the most important news of the week. All right, so that said, couple reminders as always. The summit is still going gangbusters. It's open. Again, so much great feedback on it, and we're running more ads to it as well, just to bolster up even more of the numbers. So we're really excited about that. Podcasts, John, you and I definitely have to connect podcast wise for John's podcast. And you know what, John, if you're still on here, feel free to leave a comment in terms of what the link is. And you have a couple on the go, so feel free. But if highly recommend subscribing to Mr. McDermott's podcast or podcasts after you subscribe to mine, Lead from the Inside Out. So have just firmed up a date with Lawrence Gonzalez for Deep Survival, and he is like totally on board to do a Q&A. So we'll be working that out. It's going to end up being during the day just because of his schedule, and I'm hardly in a position or wanting to dictate, hey, dude, come on my podcast, but it could only be during certain times. So I'll be June 9th, the week of the June 9th, we'll be scheduling, or that will be coming out, and the announcement will be before that. So really looking forward to that. Now, let's dive into the content of the video, and specifically how to gain respect. So we'll be covering things like how to get respect, sources of influence. So respect is one of five. There's actually a few more, but we're going to be talking about five. How do you get it, and how do you lose it? And maybe even, if I can remember, how to get it back if you've lost it. So that's what we'll be covering off. But before we get into that, let's do a quick little review here. And for those of you that have not caught the other videos, that's okay. But I'll go through. They're available to you, obviously, in previous posts. But essentially what we have going on here, we'll start with the self-coaching model. And so we have, just to review, a circumstance. And as we've talked about ad nauseum, a circumstance is just neutral. It just simply is. And it's a fact. So I am 6 feet. for example. There's no disputing that particular fact. And the saying is, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. So circumstances just is what it is. So then from there, now is where we can really start to affect change. So then typically, or I shouldn't say typically, what always happens is we have a thought associated with that circumstance. And remembering a circumstance is neither good nor bad, it just is. And then we have a thought, which is typically one sentence. And that's almost like a judgment sentence oftentimes, like, oh man, that's bad, or that's good, or that's great, or that's terrible, or that's miserable, or that's unfortunate, whatever it is. And then from the thought, we have a feeling or an emotion. Remember, if you can master this model, you can troubleshoot where your day is starting to go wrong, for example. So we have a feeling, which is driven out of the thought. And then from the feeling, we end up with an action. So we're taking action. And then last but not least, we have a result. So if you're wondering why you're having a terrible day, then, so the result is a bad encounter with somebody. You can actually work it back and really work on that. But where you can really achieve power is in this spot right here, right? So the circumstance just is. Now, one of the problems with the model, or not the problem with the model, but the way that we operate as human beings is once we kind of get into, we have our initial thought, then everything will be driven from that. And so it just becomes more evidence, right? So I'm having a bad day, and then boom, boom, boom. Everything that we see will only reflect having a bad day, for example. So, all right. So now let's take a look at that same model more from an empowerment perspective. And this is, in addition to figuring out that initial thought piece, fix that if you can, and just start being aware with it. But how about you start with the result first? So whatever that looks like. Now in our transformational leadership program, which actually is opening tomorrow. Wow. Tomorrow will be, we call it open cart. So it'll be available for about a week. So watch for that. But we talk a lot about leadership identity and identity in general. So if I am a leader that wants to be respected, for example, then that would be my result. And then you just work backwards. So then you have a result. Then you take action related to that result, okay? And then you start to feel a certain way, right? Oops. Then that drives your thoughts. Then your circumstances just, again, are what they are. But at least this time they're through the lens of working backwards. And that is very, very important. We spend a lot of time in our program on that, and I'll be spending a lot of time because there's a ton of amazing, fantastic work to be done around the subconscious programming aspect of starting with the result first. But so that is the self-coaching model. Now, another thing to think about with it is, as we go through, is changing the words and change everything. The subconscious is just receives inputs. That's all it is. It doesn't actually judge good or bad. It just takes the information that's given to it and applies it. So that's why I go back to the result piece. If you can really ingrain or program your subconscious to be results, driving that result first in your head, that identity, then everything that happens around the subconscious now feeds into supporting that identity. And again, we'll through future programs and videos and stuff, we'll deeper dive into that. So now we talked about stress, and what is stress? It's basically a reaction to a threat, and just chemical and hormonal cocktail dumps into the system, and it prepares us to basically fight, flight, or freeze. And it was designed because to give us a physical, typically in this, when it first started, a physical advantage when we're faced with saber-toothed tigers. Well, unfortunately, over the years, what's happened now is the threat has changed. So things like financial issues, relationship problems, sickness in the family, a pandemic, all of those things. The threat has changed, but the reaction has not. So we still go through the whole run the gamut. So proactively, some things that we can do to avoid putting ourselves into stressful situations, just again to review, we use the HALT method. Do not make a big decision if you're hungry, if you're angry, you're lonely, or you're tired. Okay, those 4 things: hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And if you are, then I strongly recommend that you, if possible, lay off making a big decision until you've rectified one or all of those particular situations. Again, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that we will get into at another time, but that is definitely a checklist for you, that if you're finding yourself struggling in any of those areas, just pump the brakes on the big decision. Then we talked about the defeat the beast of stress, the 5-step method to restoring calm, which is scientific, it's biologically based and highly accepted and authorized and all of those other things. So when we walk it through, an event or circumstance causes us to feel stressed. Now, keeping in mind that we actually aren't stressed, we are experiencing feelings of stress. Remember, words matter. Invokes that fight or flight response, and then the higher brain functions decrease, heart rate increases, and so on and so forth. So then to beat that, this is the real where the rubber meets the road in the 5 steps, is we recognize that we are stressed. We pause. We take 2 deep breaths, not those BS kind of superficial ones, but 2 deep breaths, move your chest. And most of the time, that alone will pump the brakes on the stress. But if not, then we can go into some box breathing, which we'll talk about here. So go through that, and then we evaluate and repeat if necessary. So that's the 5 steps right there. So then when we get into now the stress curve and we talk about the impacts of stress, it's really, really important because as you see that we actually need a certain level of stress to perform at optimal levels, because under no stress, our performance wanes. And then as we turn that stress volume knob up, even though we don't have volume knobs anymore, except maybe in our vehicles, but certainly nowhere else, not on our phones. But as we turn that volume up on stress, we do reach that point where we're in the zone. And that's our peak performance. We're in the zone, it's peak performance. A lot of times it's a state of flow, and there's more that goes into flow, but outside of the context of this conversation. But then what you'll notice here on the graph is, and this is a Yerkes-Dodson performance curve model, you see the cognitive and emotional danger zones. You see it crashing, particularly around the cognitive mind, where all of the things that make us like super good in nature, kind of the top of the food chain, goes completely out the window. And essentially we're no different than our, animalistic brothers and sisters. And that's a big problem, especially from a leadership perspective, because we don't communicate well at that point. We don't make decisions very well. We just basically don't function well at all. Now, something to keep in mind though, from even more so around a leadership perspective, is if I have a team of 5 people on my team, not only do I have to manage my own stress level, but the stress curves of everybody else. Therein lies the challenge around leadership. And so nobody said this stuff was easy. It's hard. It really, really is, which is exactly why you need to dedicate your time and effort to learning leadership. It's no different than any other skill or set of behaviors. It's no different than learning a new job, for example. This one actually goes your entire life, which actually I'm going to be talking about here in a little bit. All right. Oh, there's the box breathing. So we breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out through the mouth for 4 seconds, keep the lungs empty for 4 seconds, breathe in through the nose for 4, 4, 4, and 4. So you get the idea. That's a pretty heavy duty. That's the kind of nuclear option with regard to stress management for sure. But those 2 breaths, in my experience and a lot of others, that will often at least stop it or at least slow it down. And then if you really need to bring in the big guns, now you do the box breathing. So let's talk about respect. And I'm here to tell you that in all of my facilitation and conversations and discussions and people asking questions, one of the number one things that comes up is this notion of respect. How do I get respect? Nobody respects me, or any of those kinds of things. This word respect is so, so important, and rightfully so. And we're going to talk about where that fits in terms of the ability to influence other people. But I do want to start with this, and the golden rule is wrong. And the golden rule in this context is treat others how you would want to be treated. And that is patently false, folks. That's a slippery slope, and I would strongly suggest you do not follow the golden rule when it comes to leadership. We'll talk about what is the proper rule. It's a little bit of a variation around that, and if you can master that, then folks, you have nailed respect influence. We'll talk about that as we go through this. All right, so let's talk about sources of influence. Now, why should anyone follow you, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And one of the sources of power, the very first one, is what we call position power. And the position power or position influence is just merely that. You are just going to have influence over another person just simply because of your position. You know, maybe you're a director, you're their manager, whatever it is, you've got a lot more stripes on your shoulders, whatever the context. You are just given a certain amount of authority or influence because you have a more senior position in the organization. Now, leadership at its very core is really social influence. It's asserting or exerting social influence to achieve an outcome. And I like to say that it's applying positive social influence to achieve an outcome. So we have position. The next one is typically, we have three here, but I'll talk about the other ones as well. So we have position. Then we have what is called discipline influence. So I have influence over you because I can discipline you. I can penalize you, essentially. So I have the ability to levy some sort of a penalty against you. So therefore, I will have an influence over you based on compliance and not commitment. Right? So we have position, and then we have discipline power. The third one is reward power or reward influence. So I have an influence over you because I have the ability to reward you, whether it be monetarily, maybe it's an award, maybe it's a pat on the back, maybe it's a private, hey, good work. Right? So people will follow you because you can reward them, much like any other animal, frankly, at its very, very basics. And then we get into expert power. Expert power, there are a whole bunch of examples of this, but one of the examples in a corporate environment would be IT, for example. So IT, if they're part of a project, and I was project manager for many, many years, they have a lot of influence because of their expertise around a particular area. So regardless of where they fit on the spectrum or in the hierarchy, oftentimes if you are an expert, you will have kind of an amplified influence over other people. So that's really, really important, and it's a very, very powerful source of influence as well. So just to reiterate, we have we have position, we have discipline, we have reward, then we have expert power, and the last but not least, and that's the one that brings us here now, is respect influence. So respect influence is exactly what we're going to be talking about, is how do we get it? Now, it's really, really important to achieve respect influence because that is the strongest one. That is one, if you have gained the respect of people, they will follow you far further. They will do a lot more. They will work harder for you. They will take care of you way, way more than if they would on the other end of the spectrum, which is position. And that's exactly the point there is this position is the weakest. Respect is by far and away the strongest. So wherever possible, we really want to make sure we end up in that respect influence kind of spectrum or that area. And one of the main reasons is because when we respect somebody, and if you think about it in your own experience, you can feel it, right? It's a respect. It's a deeper seated kind of following now, where position is typically just kind of in your head cognitively. But when you're starting to talk about respect, that's when you really get some strong influence. And a lot of times it comes down to alignment of values and personalities, which is a lot more deeper into our consciousness than just our head. So those are the sources of influence, but far and away, respect influence is the one you want to get to, and the one that we're going to be talking about. It's hard to get though, and sometimes it's actually kind of easy to lose, unfortunately. Now, in terms of my journey with regard to this respect influence, I remember when I was just my young leadership was all about me, frankly. Like I took over, see, it took over. That's not even the right phrase, but I became president of a local search and rescue group when I was 19 or 20, I think. And pretty young, I suppose. Looking back, man, oh man, ignorance is bliss. Thankfully, I didn't know any better. But it can be a lot of responsibility. But when I took over, I remember, right, taking over, that, oh man, good. Finally, people are going to listen to me. I'm going to do things right. I'm not going to be like everybody else. And everybody will end up supporting my vision. And, list goes on and on and on. And looking back, I see that as very much indicative of my maturity in terms of my life skills, right? Where it was all about me, just going through high school and all that stuff and just trying to make enough money to drink a couple times a week and have a good stereo and a fast car. And so very myopic view of life, very myopic view of leadership, for sure. I don't mind looking back and saying that. But my journey, thankfully, I was self-aware and I was deliberate enough to be paying a lot of attention to what worked and what didn't. And as I became slightly older, my life changed, obviously. My view on life, my view on other people changed and evolved. And so did my leadership by association. So I realized that the model I was working on was this one originally. And it's the old model. It's the old paradigm of leadership where the leader is at the top and everybody supports that leader. And that was very much my mentality. Now, some people, quite frankly, don't grow out of that mentality. They're stuck using that model over and over and over again. And that becomes just their default. And that served us really well, and it serves us really well in certain environments. If it's public safety is often this model in that, especially if there's a high risk environment with less time where there's not a lot of time to discuss and somebody does have to make decisions quickly and authoritatively, for sure, but it's still grounded on respect, hopefully. But this model presupposes that everything feeds up to the leader. The leader makes all of the decisions with very little input in terms of what that decision looks like, but the team supports that leader and gives the leader what he or she needs. And that is a broken model. Although sadly we've used it for many, many decades and people continue to use it. So ultimately, as a leader, what is your goal? Your goal is to create psychological safety or a safe zone. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do it, but it really comes down to effective communication, creating some trust, and really making sure that people feel comfortable and safe psychologically to make decisions, to come to work every day or go into their home office every day, whatever it might be if you're a remote workforce or something like that. But it sounds very trite, create psychological safety, and it sounds a little bit BS-y, but it's not. It's not. Psychologically, we will perform much better if we have a sense of security and safety and a lot of the unknowns that we're afraid of become knowns. So as a leader, that's really what you're trying to do. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it is simple. And that's what you're trying to do, is just create that psychological safety. Now, one of the best ways you can do that is by treating people with respect and using respect influence. And I talk a lot about respect influence because for me, the transformational leader, the kind of pinnacle of what a leader is somebody that is compassionate, somebody that's vulnerable, somebody that's empathetic, somebody that's able to stay calm, people that are authentic, and they are able to communicate. They are excellent communicators, and they are leaders that lead with respect. So that's, even my program that I teach in programs is all getting you towards that goal where respect influence is your default, not fear or anything like that. As I said, it's simple, but it's not terribly easy to do, but it can be done. So the new model is this, right? It's actually having the leader on the bottom and supporting the team. So a little bit later, I'll talk about more specifically what that looks like for you as a leader. But really, if you want to leverage respect influence, if you want to have respect influence, this is the model that you will adopt and you will go towards. So this is the model, and we're talking about it. And now, granted, it doesn't replace the fact that the leader still has to make the decisions. The leader is still accountable, right? But this is now in terms of functionally how it works. The leader supports the rest of the team. Oh man, leadership presence. We could spend all day on this. Ultimately, leadership presence is the aura or the environment by which that you're creating as a leader. So it's really the feeling that people have when they're around you. And it's also the feeling that people have when they're communicating with you, either via email or by phone or anything like that. And attitude is contagious. And so if you look at Captain Kirk, he has a certain leadership presence. You look at Darth Vader, he has a certain leadership presence. And you can see the dichotomy between those two and think about to yourself, if you are following Captain Kirk, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you doing? How courageous are you? Right? You're making decisions, you're taking risks, you're a swashbuckler, you're confident, capable. But now flip that around and let's say that you're working for Darth Vader. Need I say more, right? Need I say more? Risk aversion, a lot of fear, stress, list goes on and on and on. So when we talk about respect, that is something that will permeate your leadership presence. And if you can get it as just part of your DNA, just part of your default setting, your leadership presence, your people around you will be empowered. People will want to be around you. People will want to be part of your team because you treat people with respect, and there's this entire environment that's just based on respect. All your communications are respectful. Your mannerisms, your decisions, all those things are now based on respect, and that will in turn really amplify your leadership presence. So if we don't want respect influence, what do we not do? There are a couple of things. There's a lot, but I'm only going to highlight a couple of them here. One of them is micromanage. Oh. Do not micromanage. And so what is micromanagement? It's when you as a leader or your managers or your leaders use words like I'm detail oriented. I'm involved. I'm hands-on. Micromanagement is essentially telling somebody what to do and how to do it. And the reason that is what not to do in terms of respect is because essentially what you're telling the person that you're micromanaging is, I don't trust you. Really, think about that. Think about that. And you're like, no, that's not true. Yeah, it is true. It is true. Search your feelings, right? Just to use a Star Wars kind of analogy. So think about that. Micromanagement is absolutely the dichotomy. It is the antithesis of respect. And I hear it all the time. I'm like, no, hey, Daryl, no, I respect folks, but I just really like to make sure certain things get done a certain way. Well, okay. But that means that you're doing it yourself and you're telling the person that they're not capable of doing it as well. So very, very important. If you're finding yourself micromanaging, being very detail oriented, just know that that's actually subtracting from your respect influence. Yeah, truth hurts sometimes. I know. Now, the other one is being angry and leading by fear and intimidation and bullying. We see this so much. And, you know, a lot of people are like, well, people need to know that who's in charge and I have to be strong. I have to be, you know, very assertive and powerful and blah, 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 all this other bullshit. And it's not true. It's not true. Here's the problem is that behavior, that anger, that bullying creates results. It really, really does. I'm not going to lie. It creates results. People will do what you want them to do if you are leading with fear. And so the problem now becomes that is a positive feedback loop for you as a leader. You're like, hey, you know what? That actually works. No drama around that. Awesome. Everyone's doing what I'm telling them to do. Everybody is in order. No drama. That's what the inner dialogue of the leader that's using fear to motivate people. But everybody else around, think about it, right? Darth Vader. I wouldn't want to be on the Death Star. A couple reasons for that. One, in each movie it explodes. Secondly, like it's a toxic work environment working for Darth Vader and the Emperor and all that stuff. Like think about that. It's terrible, terrible. So leading by fear is definitely going to drive results, but it will create a team that is compliant but not committed. Huge difference. Like that's like a crazy difference between a team that's compliant. Yeah, it will do everything that you need it to do, but a committed team will do everything you need it to do, but it'll be done far easier, far less drama, and in fact, that team will do even more if they're committed rather than compliant. So a couple things that detract from that respect influence for sure. Micromanagement, kick that to the curb. Second one is leading with fear, being angry and intimidating all the time, which frankly, if all you have is a hammer, every problem's a nail. And that's how I characterize people that lead by fear. They're just not emotionally intelligent. They're just not able to control their emotions, or they're not able to really self-regulate. So as I talk about self-mastery and transformational leadership and in my program, it's all about self-regulation and self-control and controlling the inside, and then you can positively influence those on the outside. So if you're working with a leader that's always angry all the time, well, they come by it honestly, because a lot of times that's the model that they were raised in. So here is the rule. Respect. How do you get it? Man, it's so simple, but it's not easy. And I can't say it any more clearly than this. If you want respect, you have to give it. Yeah, that's it. Peace out. That's it. You have to give the respect. But here's the problem, folks. This is a huge problem that I come into when I consult or coach executives and leaders all over the world, for that matter. One of the big issues is they're like, well, hold on, they should just respect me as I'm their leader, I'm their boss. No, that's old school. That's old school. That went the way of the Flintstones, okay? What has to happen is, as a leader, you respect first. You're the one that shows vulnerability first. You're the one that shows empathy first. You show compassion first. That's just part of the gig of being a leader. You lead. You lean in. So if you want respect influence, you have to give it first. So important. So get over it. Get over your ego. Get over whatever paradigm of leadership you have in your head. Your job is not to impose yourself on other people. Your job is to lean in and show them what respect looks like, because they're also looking at you all the time. They're judging you. They're monitoring your behavior. They're having some chats behind your back. That's human nature a lot of times. And it's not even overt. Like, it's not check. It's subconscious, where there's a constant size up, constant evaluation. So if you're saying one thing but doing something else, they're going to notice that. Absolutely they will. And you'll start to lose respect. Or if you're saying, hey, you know what? I demand respect. Man, I've heard that before. I demand your respect. No, bullshit. No, that's fine. If you're going to play that game, sure, I'll pretend to respect you, but I'm not going to. And that's not the kind of team that you want, right? You want that team that respect is mutual, where I respect the team member and they will in turn respect us. It's not their job to respect first. And hopefully I've made that point crystal clear. So in tangible terms, what does that look like, Daryl? So, okay, I get it. Well, remember when I opened up and said the golden rule is wrong? This is what I mean by that. The golden rule is wrong because it says treat others how you would want to be treated. Okay, on the surface that sounds like a lot of sense, right? Makes sense? Sure. Well, here's the issue is that is ignoring the other party in this relationship. Who's your team member? Oh, that's weird, right? Remember, it's about putting the team first. So here's the slight alteration to the rule. Treat others as they want to be treated. Treat others as they want to be treated. It's not up to you to judge that, oh man, they're so sensitive, or man, they are hard to get through, or whatever it is. It's not up to you. Who gave you the right to impose your thoughts and your views on how they are? No. And as a leader, you have to find that out. How do they want to be treated? Some people really enjoy banter and sarcasm, right? And that's, honestly, in some environments, that's exactly how you show respect. Like, if they're not bugging you, if you're not being heckled, people don't love you. And that's the truth. That is the truth. But not everybody functions in that environment. Not everyone's happy being bantered with. Not everyone likes being the butt of a joke or self-deprecation, whatever that is. So your job as a leader is to treat others how they want to be treated, and find that out. Find that out. So to take that a little bit further in terms of tangibles, one of the surefire ways that you can show respect, and it's simple to do, is really comes down to these two questions of what I call a transformational leader. One is, what are you working on? Okay, what are you working on? Pretty straightforward, right? You walk up to somebody at their desk or around the water cooler. Hey, what are you working on? And the second one is, what support can I give? There's a couple things, well, many reasons why this works really, really well. One, it's super simple, because remember, if I'm teaching it, it's simple. There's not a ton of, there's one hamster operating at any given time, and so I need stuff simple, because I need things I can execute on as a leader. So what are you working on? And then, so what that does is one, it shows people that you're paying attention, that they're not just off in the corner office and not doing anything. But it updates you as well, right? Part of your job as a leader is to be accountable and responsible for the workload and workflow and outcomes and all those things. So it gives you a little bit of a situation report. But then the what support can I give does two things. One, it literally asks. You're offering support. You're not telling them that you're going to support them. And remember the bane of our existence, no pun intended there, Dave Bain, but was micromanagement. Well, this forces you to back off, and it allows the team members say, hey, you know, I sure would love if you could talk to that manager, to talk to Betty in accounting. She's not getting back to me on anything, and it's a big problem for our project. So that will now give you something to do, and you're not just walking in and barging in on somebody and imposing your will on them. And so those two questions are very, very simple and easy to do. And if that just becomes part of your day-to-day operating system when you're dealing with people, then all the better. So we've given, one, the two questions, and further to micromanagement and why it's so important not to micromanage relative to respect influence is again, I can't stress this enough. You're telling them you don't trust them. And so we talked about those two questions. Now, the second technique to show respect on the ground is to delegate, right? So delegate. Now, I know there's a lot of reluctance to delegate out these days. A bunch of reasons for that. It's usually fear-based. And so if I'm a leader and I don't delegate, it's one, I don't trust other people to do it, or maybe I'm under a lot of stress, and under stress, we tend to control or want to control a lot more stuff. So delegation is such a great technique, provided it's done in the right context. So to delegate effectively, one of the most important things you need to do is give what we call intent, or leader's intent. And there's different elements of intent, but one of the most important parts of it is you delegate, but you give the people that you're delegating to, or the person, the end state. Tell them what right looks like, and then let them go and achieve that on their own. And you support them. Remember, what are you working on? How can I support? So by delegating, you're telling them that you trust them, and they're empowered. Think about that. They feel like empowered. That's a lot more flexible. And as a leader, you don't have to micromanage them after that. You're just checking in for statuses, and you're supporting them where you need. But if you have 5 people on your team and you delegate effectively, those are 5 people that are now out doing tasks that you don't have to do. And your job is to monitor and support, and then start thinking ahead of what's happening. So those are the main techniques, very simple techniques that you can start using tomorrow. The 2 questions. So what are you working on, and how can I help? Or what support can I give you? And the second one is delegate. Delegate off and give them the end state. One watch out with delegation, though, is you want to make sure that who you're delegating the task to is capable of doing it. Like maybe they need to be equipped both from a training perspective and a resource perspective, because otherwise you're actually just setting them up for failure. All right, so let's do a very quick review. Respect influence is by far and away the most powerful leadership influence you can have. It's the exact opposite of position influence, which a lot of people leverage. And so for us to get the respect influence, we have to treat others with respect first. Okay, we act first, not them. We use the 2 questions. What are you working on? What support can I give you? And then the second part is you delegate. And I'll close this off with a question. Actually, literally today I was asked this question. Well, what do you do if someone loses respect for you? Maybe you blew up at them, and you just lost your poop. It happens. We're human beings, right? Maybe because you haven't used the 5-step defeat the beast method. I get it. Well, it's not all doom and gloom, because like anything else, you can recover, provided you recover in the right way. So one of the best ways that we see in the real world is if you maybe upset somebody or you erode your respect influence over a particular episode or something. First thing is own it. Apologize, right? Apologize. Don't defend. Do not defend. Do not justify. Do not rationalize. Do not do any of that. Own it. Own it like a good leader would. And then from there, you apologize. Say, hey, you know what? Sorry, that was not in alignment with my values or the corporate values or whatever that is. And moving forward, I will be better. I will not behave the way I just did again. And then act. Act. That's all you can do. So don't expect that you're going to be getting that respect back right away, but you will get it back. And a lot of times, my experience, you even get more, because we're all human. Nobody expects leaders to be inhuman. Nobody expects them to be Data from Star Trek or a robot. In fact, the human experience, the human condition, means that we're all in this together, and we want other people to be human. I respect people that aren't perfect. I respect people that aren't invincible. I respect people that are courageous, but not fearless, right? There's a difference there. Courage is acting and feeling the fear, but acting in spite of it. So I want a human being as a leader. I want somebody that's fallible, that makes mistakes, not because I'm encouraging it, but it means that they're human. And I'll take that all day long. I'll take that to the bank all day long. And I will hitch my wagon to a leader that respects me and that is accountable and responsible. And when a mistake is made, they own it. Absolutely. Count me in. I'll work for that leader all day long. So hopefully this was helpful. And again, it really talks to the crux of one of the main issues I come across day in and day out around leadership, and that is this whole notion of respect. So when I talk about my transformational leadership method, around 3 pillars: self-mastery, because if you can't control what happens on the inside, can't control anything on the outside. The second pillar is positive influence. That's where respect falls right into it. Is a way to positively influence another person is through respect. That is I shouldn't say the easiest. That is the most powerful way. And then the third element of my transformational leadership method is execution. Ultimately being able to execute on leadership. We can read all the books we want, but who cares? Who cares? If we can't actually lead tactically in the office or in the field, then we're kind of useless. So anyways, so hopefully that was valuable. And if you're watching the replay, feel free to leave a comment or a question or anything, or even just some feedback. I would love to see it. Tomorrow is how to communicate. Wow. And I'll tell you, as leaders, if we can't communicate, we aren't leading. And I'll also tell you that one of the parts of communication, one of the key tenets of communication is listening. And I'll follow that statement up by saying we suck at listening. And if you think we're good at it, well, congratulations. You're better than 98% of the population. So tomorrow we will be talking tactically on how to communicate. And then on Friday, we'll be talking about how to start and have a difficult conversation. So make sure you sign up for the reminders if you're on YouTube or whatever, the bell notification, reminders on Facebook, whatever it is. And please leave some comments with some feedback. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. I sincerely appreciate it.